It's day 6 of Lions training camp, and it's safe to say that the defense showed up with a lot to prove today. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more, starting right now. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko. I am one of the content creators for the POD YouTube channel, and we are once again going to be talking about Lions training camp and recapping some of the biggest news to come out from today's practice. Now, like I've always said in all of these recaps, these are shorter recaps, but if you are looking for something that's a little more in depth, that's a little more detailed, that basically runs through maybe every phase of this Lions roster, I highly suggest that you guys check out Pride of Detroit Direct. I understand that that may not be an expense that everybody is capable of making, but there is some added value in that service. One of those services being that throughout training camp, you get to see a firsthand account of what took place at training camp from both Eric Schlitt and Jeremy Reisman, as they are the ones that have, personally there at training camp, giving a firsthand account of everything that they saw from camp today. But if you can't, that's perfectly fine, because that's what I'm here for, to help fill you guys in on some of the biggest things that took place in camp today. And before we jump into some of the particular parts of practice that really, stood out today, I do think we have to talk about the latest news that just came out from the Detroit Lions, and that being that defensive end John Kaminsky did, in fact, is being reported that he has suffered a torn MCL during practice today. And this is a pretty big blow to the Lions' depth along that defensive line. As many of us know as Lions fans, John Kaminsky has really carved a role out for himself since coming to the Lions from his time in Atlanta, and really proved to be one of those key rotational guys that could play in the middle of the defensive line, but also kick out on the outside as well, and was showing to be a really strong anchor in run defense as well. So throughout camp, Kaminsky was kind of seeing himself getting pushed down to the third team, but it was kind of hard to fully count him out considering all the value that he's brought to this team to this point. This type of injury, it sounds like it's something that's going to keep him for quite a while, if not the entire season. And so it does open the door for, more players to have opportunities to be able to make this roster. But with that said, it's definitely a sad day to see a player like Kaminsky suffer this kind of injury, because like I said, he's given so much to this team to this point. So from us over here at Pride of Detroit, we are definitely wishing John Kaminsky a speedy recovery, and, hopefully that we'll see him back on the field sooner rather than later. Now, with that out the way, let's dive into the rest of what happened at practice today. And yesterday in our recap for day 5, we talked a lot about, first and foremost, the pads going on, and that being a really strong day for the offensive line and for the offense in general. Today was a little bit different. The defense definitely showed up and definitely matched that intensity that I'm pretty sure the offense was giving out yesterday. And we saw a lot more in terms of playmaking from both the defense on the back end in regards to the secondary, and from the defensive line. If we start with the secondary, we finally got our first couple of interceptions during team drills. The first one coming from second-round draft pick Ennis Rakestraw Jr., who had an amazing pick from a pass thrown by Hendon Hooker. And that kind of just started the domino effect of, a couple other players getting, their hands on footballs and being able to create turnovers. Derek Barnes was able to pick off Jared Goff. And then there was another interception that Hendon Hooker threw as well during some team drill situations. Probably not the best day for Hendon Hooker, considering that a couple days ago we were, definitely highlighting the fact that he was showing some progress and showing some growth from what we saw in the spring, especially once we got information that, he was dealing with a finger injury. Kind of a bit of a step backwards today in terms of, again, just being able to keep the ball safe. But his bad day is definitely a hat tip to this defense and to what Aaron Glenn is putting together, who, speaking of Aaron Glenn, I think is still, for the most part, for some fans, is a little bit under the gun still, just for, people looking at him to put together a complete defense. There's no doubt in my mind that Aaron Glenn put together one of the best run defenses last year, and that's clearly shown through statistics and just what the Lions were able to do week in and week out. Now he has to be able to showcase that same level of growth and bringing this, unit along in the past. Today is at least a good, step in the right direction. Being able to have some of your linebackers and your corners get interceptions and just play sticky defense, and especially for it to be your young guys. A guy like Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is someone that early in the draft process, or even like throughout the draft process, was someone that was seen either as a late day 1 to an early day 2 pick. And for the Lions to get him in day 2 and to pair him up with Terrion Arnold, you're really kind of setting yourself up well for the future at that position. Obviously, Terrion Arnold has been getting a lot of snaps with the first team opposite Carlton Davis, but Ennis Rakestraw Jr. has been a mainstay when it comes down to the second team, and specifically on the outside. In the spring, they definitely, experimented with him a bit, playing nickel and things of that nature. But when you go to that second team unit and they need to have a corner on the outside, Rakestraw Jr. has been the consistent option there. And so it is something that, when you're investing in two young corners, you would like to believe that, like, hey, those are probably your corners for the future. And with a player like Carlton Davis, who still has a lot of tread left on the tire, it's something that I think it gives the Lions that level of flexibility that, if Carlton Davis has a good season, maybe, they can try to negotiate. But if he ends up wanting too much money, they at least have that, flexibility to maybe pass on giving him a big contract because they know that they have young players in the wing. And Rakestraw Jr. is the ideal corner, I think, along with Terrion Arnold, for what Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell want to do with this defense. They are long, they are physical, especially Rakestraw, very physical in the run game, very much wants to mix it up, and is not afraid to, make the big hit, and is looking to make turnovers. So the fact that he got his first one today, I think, is a good sign of things to come for the rest of training camp. We may not see him a ton, on the week in, week out basis as far as playing outside corner. There may need to be some injuries that take place for us to see him get on the field. But that type of mentality, and if he continues to trend in the right direction, that is going to be something that this coaching staff is going to take notice of. And at least they know they have a viable option waiting in the wings if there is a situation to where, like I said, if an injury takes place, if someone is kind of struggling one way or the other, whether it's Terrion or Carlton Davis, they know they don't have to just stick with that option. They can definitely rotate a fresh body in, which we've seen Aaron Glenn be unafraid to do in the past when it was, Jerry Jacobs or Amani Oruwariye. They were willing to just pull guys and put other players in if they thought that they were going to play at a more competitive level. So Ennis Rakestraw Jr. showing that competitive, showing that ability to make plays this early in training camp is a great sign for him and for this defense as a whole. Speaking of defense as a whole, we have to talk about this entire defensive line unit. Over the last couple of days, I've been really talking about and really singing the praises of Levi Onwuzurike. But again, with the offensive line having such a strong day yesterday, we saw the defensive line today come back and be just a nightmare, both in the run game and in creating pressure. And it's not just one person in particular. We've talked about Levi, and Levi is in fact continuing to be a monster, even, going into second day of pads. Aleem is continuing to show that growth. Aiden Hutchinson is Aiden Hutchinson. Like, he's going to be that guy. But then there were a couple new names that we were starting to see kind of flash today in practice. Marcus Davenport being one of those guys, a guy that is, definitely battled his fair share of injuries and is trying to get back, into the swing of things and being a mainstay for this defense. And he was definitely doing that today, being a strong, big edge that he is, being able to set strong edges, being able to force runs back inside, and which gives those defensive tackles and those linebackers more opportunities to make plays. Another player that we haven't talked about a lot is actually a UDFA, and that's Isaac Ukwu, who was a player that I was actually really high on as a UDFA target in regards to if there was a UDFA that could potentially make this roster. He was one of those guys I was looking at. And basically some of the reports that we've gotten out of training camp so far is that he's been having consistent, strong days working with the third team and just kind of just showing up, making plays here and there throughout training camp. Now, it's worth saying it mostly is with the third team, and it is mostly just a couple plays here and there. It's consistent. It's those day-to-day things that Dan Campbell and this coaching staff like to see. And so his ability to, again, show up in both the run game as well as continuing to create consistent pressure in pass down situations is a very good look for him. Even today, having a tackle for loss and registering a sack on the day, those are the types of things that, hey, this is going to get, the coaching staff's attention. And then if you can kind of roll that production into these preseason games and continue to show up and make plays like that when, the lights are quote unquote somewhat of the biggest and you start getting down to cut days, Ukua could definitely see himself in a situation where, again, he's pushing some of these other guys that are looking for, who are looking to have a roster spot at the edge position, could maybe push one of those guys out. Now, it's also worth pointing out that Ukua was drafted in the UFL. And so he's going to have some options, even if he doesn't make the roster. I could definitely see him be a player that the Lions prioritize and want to get onto their practice squad and continue to want to develop. But he's going to also, like I said, have that option to go to the UFL and maybe choose to develop in that space as well, where he may be able to get onto the field and play actual football instead of just being a practice squad body. So that's just a name that, like I said, we haven't talked a ton about UDFAs, or at least I haven't talked a ton about UDFAs during these recaps. Like I said, if you want to get more of that insight, I definitely suggest checking out the Pride of Detroit Direct subscription and checking out some of the things that Eric and Jeremy have to say when they're breaking down practice. But considering the day that the defense was having, and not just wanting to leave it to, talking about the names that we're all familiar with, I definitely wanted to throw in a UDFA guy that is seemingly turning heads now. Just because I did most of this video talking about the defense does not mean that nothing good happened on the offense. But that is something that I am unfortunately going to leave to Jeremy and Eric, because they did a much better job of breaking down some of the different players that actually stood out on the offensive end. And like I said, it is definitely worth checking out. Just to give you guys a bit of a tease, there's some really good stuff about Craig Reynolds over there. There was some really good stuff once again about Jamison Williams. Darius Fountain is continuing to kind of push the envelope in terms of being a wide receiver that could really challenge for one of these roster spots. If you really want to get, the nitty gritty, the details on what those players are doing, once again, check out Pride of Detroit Direct. You will not regret it. Outside of training camp, once the season kind of progresses into the regular season, there are still going to be unique content that is not going to be available on the YouTube channel, or that's not going to be available on the website, and that you will have full reign and full access to by having that subscription. So, with all of that said, if you were looking for any more additional content outside of POD Direct and outside of the current YouTube channel, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com. There will be an observation article that is over on the website that you can check out and get even more insight onto some of the things that I didn't talk about in this video that took place at practice today. You can also get a little more insight into what took place in regards to John Kaminsky's injury and what that means for the Lions roster going forward, because I'm sure there's definitely some implications in what the Lions will have to do with that vacant roster spot now if they decide and if they end up having to put John Kaminsky on IR. So with all of that said, thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Once again, my name is Miko, and if you are new to this channel and if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, leave a like for this video. All of those things help out the channel immensely. And yeah, thank you guys, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.